After attending the recent G20 summit in India, U.S. President Joe Biden visited Vietnam.
A lot has changed since the Vietnam War ended in 1975, which was marked by frosty relations. Nowadays, both countries see the potential to become better friends and business partners. The U.S. aims to strengthen its connections in Southeast Asia to counter China's influence in the region, while Vietnam wants to increase its exports to the U.S., which is already its largest export market. However, can U.S. succeed in wooing Vietnam in order to counter China? Can the upgraded U.S. and Vietnam relations prevent China's growth? Well, you are about to find out in this video. Before you continue, make sure you subscribe to our channel so that you will continue to receive more interesting videos about the happenings in Asia. The U.S., China, and Vietnam's relations. Vietnam has become a prominent global manufacturing center, thanks to economic reforms in the 1990s. As the relationship between the U.S. and China appears increasingly fragile, American corporations are beginning to relocate their production operations to Vietnam. Companies like Apple, Nike, Google, Dell, and Microsoft are either moving to Vietnam or expanding their presence there to decrease their dependence on Chinese factories. Biden's visit to Hanoi coincided with Vietnam granting the United States its highest diplomatic status, calling it a comprehensive strategic partner. This change highlights how much the relationship has transformed since the Vietnam War, which President Biden referred to as a difficult period. This enhanced partnership is part of a wider effort in Asia to counter China's influence. Biden has mentioned that Vietnam seeks more independence, and U.S. companies are looking for alternatives to Chinese imports. He is pursuing potential allies while also trying to ease tensions with China. Biden is making a strong effort to bring Vietnam closer to the United States in response to concerns about China. However, this approach may not be the wisest choice for several reasons. Firstly, Biden's visit to Vietnam is primarily motivated by the desire to confront China, not by a primary concern for Vietnam's interests. According to Radio France Internationale, Biden's diplomatic activities in Asia are centered around challenging the world's second-largest economy. In essence, Vietnam is being treated as a battleground for major global powers, with the United States positioning Vietnam as a swing state that can serve its interests in countering China. Secondly, what Biden is offering to Vietnam may not align with Vietnam's own needs and national interests. A U.S. scholar has pointed out that Washington seems more willing to risk upsetting Beijing than Hanoi is. Despite extensive discussions in the U.S. and Western media about Biden's visit, there is little mention of the concrete benefits it will bring to Vietnam. This situation resembles a situation where someone is trying to cook without the essential ingredients, as the focus is more on aligning Vietnam with the U.S. than addressing Vietnam's specific concerns. American and Western perspectives, as well as the priorities of the Washington government, may not necessarily align with Vietnam's national interests. Their primary goal appears to be getting Vietnam to align closely with the United States. An article in the Diplomat magazine is titled "Vietnam's Time to Choose," despite the clear understanding that Vietnam, like other Southeast Asian countries, is reluctant to take sides in the U.S.-China rivalry. Nevertheless, the U.S. continues to exert pressure and influence in this direction, employing diplomatic tactics that may be seen as coercive by independent and sovereign nations. Vietnam has also actively maintained positive relations with China. Vietnamese leaders have made visits to Beijing, and they consider their relationship with China a top priority. Vietnam aims to strike a balance between its relations with China and the U.S., both major global powers. However, the current actions by the U.S. appear to be tipping the scales away from Vietnam's desired equilibrium, making it challenging for Vietnam to maintain this balance. This situation underscores the need for Vietnam to exercise caution in its diplomatic decisions. Vietnam cannot replace China. In recent years, Vietnam has emerged as a preferred destination for companies seeking to diversify their manufacturing away from China. Vietnam offers several attractive features, including low input costs, political stability, and increasingly open trade and investment policies, especially following its free trade agreement with the EU. However, two key factors constrain Vietnam's ability to absorb a significant portion of China's manufacturing and move up the value chain.
First, its heavy reliance on foreign inputs for production, and second, its relatively small population size.
Vietnam's labor force is only about 7% the size of China's, which limits its capacity to accommodate a large number of companies seeking an alternative to China's rising production costs. While Vietnam has succeeded in attracting businesses in sectors like textiles, footwear, and electronics, its smaller scale compared to China means that it cannot fully replace production that demands a massive workforce. Consequently, companies looking to diversify from China may find a partial solution in Vietnam, leaving opportunities for other economies in Asia and elsewhere if they can compete effectively. Additionally, Vietnam's relatively young population is projected to age significantly over the coming decades, as indicated by UN population projections.
This demographic shift could pose challenges to sustained economic growth. To address this, the government has initiated efforts to promote fertility. However, these trends suggest that Vietnam cannot afford to rest on its economic achievements. To avoid potential economic stagnation, Vietnam must swiftly address its structural weaknesses, notably by investing in infrastructure improvements that enhance connectivity between its domestic firms and the global value chain.
Another significant factor limiting Vietnam's competitive advantage over China is the composition of its gross exports, which often includes a substantial proportion of intermediate goods sourced from China and South Korea. While Vietnam has undoubtedly achieved remarkable export growth, a significant portion of this growth is benefiting foreign companies rather than domestic enterprises. Vietnam's increasing reliance on Chinese inputs for its production processes is a trend that has evolved over the years. This integration with China has led to a higher dependency on Chinese intermediates for manufacturing. Meanwhile, other countries within the ASEAN region have been reducing their dependency on Chinese inputs. Vietnam will maintain ties with China. Efforts by the United States to make Vietnam its close ally in its competition with China may not succeed, experts say. That's because Vietnam is careful not to upset its much bigger neighbor, China. According to Zachary Abuza, a professor who studies Southeast Asian politics and security at the National War College in Washington, China is way more important to Vietnam than the United States. He adds that Vietnam and China have a long history of friendship based on similar socialist ideas, and Vietnam's way of thinking is more in line with China's than with the United States. It's interesting to note that the United States is Vietnam's second biggest trading partner after China. In 2022, they traded goods worth $138 billion, according to the U.S. State Department. This shows that China is well aware of the strong economic connection between Vietnam and the United States. Vietnam's geographical proximity to China is playing a significant role in its emergence as a preferred manufacturing destination, often referred to as a China Plus One option. For instance, cities like Hai Phong in Vietnam are remarkably close, just 865 kilometers away, from China's prominent manufacturing hub in Shenzhen. This geographical advantage allows manufacturers to establish production centers in close proximity to their traditional bases in China, resulting in cost savings and minimal disruptions to established supply chains. Furthermore, a considerable number of factories in Vietnam are owned by foreign companies, with investments originating from China, Taiwan, and South Korea. This foreign investment dynamic eases the transition from China to Vietnam, as it facilitates the transfer of existing checklists, specifications, and other critical product-related information. Therefore, Vietnam still relies heavily on China for its economic growth. So, in simpler terms, Vietnam is unlikely to choose the United States over China as its close friend because China is a much bigger and more important neighbor to Vietnam. They have a long history of being friendly, and their ways of thinking are more similar. Plus, Vietnam does a lot of business with the United States, so China knows how important Vietnam is to them. While it's true that the historical shift from bitter enemies to strategic partners signifies significant progress in U.S. and Vietnam relations, President Biden's visit to Vietnam, aimed at countering China's influence, may encounter certain challenges in achieving its strategic objectives. Nevertheless, it's crucial to recognize that the visit holds potential benefits for Vietnam, particularly in terms of economic growth, increased business opportunities, and the expansion of bilateral agreements. So, do you think the U.S. move to woo Vietnam to counter China's growth is a good strategy? Share your thoughts and leave your comments below.
If you like what you watch, hit the like button to show your support. More importantly, subscribe to this channel so that you will continue to receive more interesting videos about the happenings in Asia.